maybe by a quick sign of emoji. I'm going to say show non-participants as well. Maybe using an emoji. Can people give like some sign if they're educators out there, just so I have an overview who out there, yeah, with an emoji or video cam, who out there are educators to get a feeling for the room. Okay, quite a few. Great. And I'm guessing it's been tricky teaching code remotely the past year and a half too, as an understatement. I think one of the toughest things about teaching code remotely has been having students ask for help, like just that ability that while you're showing something, I'm not even sharing my screen yet, but the minute I am sharing my screen and I'm trying to walk people through code, they might have a bug or a question and could be hesitant to ask for help, because that would mean I stop sharing my screen so they could share their screen to look for that help. And it can often just be hesitating for students to ask for that help, and then they sit and get maybe further lost, or sometimes we've used like paste bin to send things around between students where they update their code. But I want to show you two tools that I've been developing that are especially useful during these remote teaching times and performative as well. Yeah, breakout rooms has been huge for offering help with people. And that's what super inspired the second tool that I'll show you. Okay, great. Yep, so I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to share my screen. Let's close that thing and open up one other thing. Let's see. Where is Zoom? It's in full screen mode. There we go. So let's say share. I'll share. I don't need to share sound. I'm going to not say for video just in case so we get a sharper image. I sometimes think it looks better. And we'll share this desktop. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen. Great. So I'm going to first take you to a place called p5live.org. I'll add this to the chat. Let me just open up the chat and put it on the side here. And what this is a tool I've been developing for almost 3 years now. That was initially created with the intent of VJing, like using P5 to VJ. So we have this full screen environment where we're seeing P5 behind the code. We have the code on top of it. And I could do something like say, I want a circle that follows my mouse X at a size of 50. And I just get to start playing with code right away. And I could say, it should be bigger. And now I get to see it that much bigger. Or just kidding, I want it smaller, and I get to see the thing smaller. So this started out as a VJ tool so that we could do like algo rave style live coding in front of an audience. And pretty soon into it, I realized like we're in the browser. We're so used to things like Google Docs and Etherpad. What if we could collaborate with each other? So I'll just go down real quick and look at this meta. I'm going to move the video panel over here. Let's see how that goes. I mean, real quick, what is P5 Live? It's essentially a full screen P5.js running in the background with a text editor sitting on top of it. And then P5 Live is like letting you save your sketches, import, export, and has all these different functions built into it. But one of the key things is COCODING, especially for teaching P5 remotely, is a feature that could really be helpful. And what it does is it basically synchronizes one document between multiple people. And as we make changes, everyone else sees those updates locally on their machine. So you're like sharing code and then running it locally. So what I'm going to do, you don't need to do this. I'll pass you a link, but just so you know in the future, when using this tool, so I get to this website. When you first landed, it had this about screen it's the huge README that goes on too long. I'll give you a tip later. There's a video series on YouTube that walks you through a lot of the functionality here so you can get familiar with it. But we start out here with our code on the left, menu on the right. And when I want to start a new session, I click this Start COCODING. And only I need to do this for this group environment right now, because I'll share the link of this session with you all. So I click Start COCODING. It starts it up. And now I have a URL that I could share with my class or peers, other students, collaborators. I'll paste it in the chat. And I'm going to quickly lock the room as people enter, or lock the editor as people enter. There we go. We have all kinds of fun animals appearing. Everyone gets a generative name as you enter, generative color, and you are always the top name. So you'll see yourself first, and all you have to do to customize yourself is click on it and give a new name and color. I forgot to mention at the beginning, I highly recommend using a Chromium-based browser for this. It's just been my experience that the JavaScript engine in Chromium browsers, Chrome, Chromium, Brave, Opera, maybe the new Microsoft editor, I haven't tried. They tend to work the fastest with all this P5 stuff. So I recommend firing up one of those. Yeah, so we now have 16 people. I'll give another minute for people to join until we have, all right, we have 43 people in here. We'll also see if we end up killing my server. I've had 30 plus people in these sessions without a problem. And I already see a bunch of flashing lights. This means people figuring out the GUI on the side, that it does something if they click on it. These are people requesting edit access, which I'll walk you through in just a minute. But what I did as people arrive, you'll see on my screen, I have this lock icon in the upper right. You won't see this as a user. I'm sort of the admin because I created the room. And so it gives me extra functions where I have the ability to lock the room. And what that does is it means no one else can edit except for myself. So I'm going to give everyone a circle following their mouse again. Circle, mouse X, mouse Y, 50. And everyone should be able to draw on their screen. I'm going to erase it on you once. Yes, please join this link that I just added to the chat. Come on down, go to this link. And you should be able to draw on your screen. You should be able to move the mouse around, and with the code that I gave for everyone, that should be running on everyone else's. Is that working for people? Exactly. So the question came up, is the canvas our own, but the code is shared? That's exactly what's happening. So we're basically sharing this text document that's sitting on top. It's going out to everyone. All the changes are being received by everyone, and it's executing, it's compiling locally on your machine. So that's why you get real-time rates. I'm going to fade it out on us. There's something nice in P5Live called soft compile. I can demonstrate if I type fast enough, it should fade out on you. And that's because we can hot swap the draw on the fly, which means that we can sort of make changes and see those changes without having to recompile everything. So I can disable the background and now you get to leave a trace, or I turn it back on and it fades away. Yeah, I hope everyone brought popcorn. Loading still in progress for me. Hanif, I suggest, maybe you missed it. If you have a Chromium-based browser, that would be good to try out. Just in case it's something on a browser, maybe double check there aren't extensions that might be blocking things active. Hey, and somebody found the chat here. We can also be chatting here. Yeah, in the very first version, we had to chat via the comments, but now there's chat inside of the place there. Okay, great. Firefox was hopeless, Chrome instantly. Yeah, it's really a question of which browsers are working smoothest with this. How is it fading again? Good question. This is fading because our background has 2 parameters. So if I gave just one parameter, then it would be just that last spot. It's saying, hey, use the color black every frame. So 60 frames a second, it's showing me a circle, then showing me a background, circle, background, circle, background. But if I give a second parameter, then it's the alpha of that background. So I could say 5, and then it's able to leave such a trace. If I said 55, it leaves a much shorter trace because it's a little bit more opaque for the background. Okay, I wasn't here the last time using P5Live. It could have been a while ago. Great. So essentially, I use this to demonstrate to the whole class often. I'll have everyone come into there, and I can demonstrate something like a loop, or I could demonstrate some concept, and then I have students go and jump into their own sessions. Two really important shortcuts that I want to tell you about. If you press Control E, like Edward, you can turn the editor on and off. So Control E, you can see down in the lower corner, I have, it shows you the shortcut I'm pressing. Control E will turn this on and off. And I use that all the time if I want to have the whole screen to play with and want to get the code out of the way. And then I just press it again, Control E to bring it back. For the menu on the right, I can press, there's a bar there, which actually I took off. I'll put it back so it's like you see it. You can use this to collapse, open and close it. Or hopefully Control M works on your computer. On a Windows and Linux, I may have caused a conflict there. Hopefully not. Control M should toggle the menu. But it's maybe helpful to keep the menu open for now. I'm going to pause the recording for just a minute. Oops, I was pausing the share. I'm going to pause the recording. Where is this? Pause recording. Yeah, Vim key bindings and settings. Yeah, I've never used Vim rather. It came up on an issue a while ago, figured out we could add it to the editor. So enjoy that. I have no idea what I'm doing in that binding. Let me walk you through some of the features that COCODING has. So at the I'm going to just focus on this panel on the right. One can leave COCODING. So when we're in COCODING, we have to keep in mind it's this volatile space that what happens here it's volatile. It could disappear at any time. If the server crashed, if our browser crashed, we have to keep in mind that this is a kind of playground, a sandbox that we should collaborate with, but then we shouldn't depend on. And that's why there's this second button called Clone Sketch. And anytime you press that, you'll see it's a bit shrunken on the side here, but on the very bottom right, you'll see there's a folder that got created for our current session, and it added the document down there. And I don't want to click on it. If I clicked on it, it'll say, do you want to exit COCODING? And I say, no, I'm just kidding. Because we can't look at an offline file and be in this online space at the same time because we only have this one editor. So it's saving a copy of what we're doing here. And I encourage students, whenever we're demonstrating something, to take a snapshot, basically, clone the sketch whenever something is happening that they're interested in, or when they're collaborating together, every so often to take snapshots of the code. I'm going to pause for just a second. Okay. Yeah, so I encourage people to press the clone all the time. And it's just a nice way of kind of taking snapshots of your progress while going along. And what it means, what does this mean that they're saved in our sketches down below here? Everything that happens inside of P5Live is only inside of your browser, local storage it's called. So what does that mean? It means it's not in a cloud anywhere. It's on your machine in your browser. Which is nice because it means you can install P5Live offline, and then you don't need an internet connection to use it. It also means that no one else can see your sketches. So they only live in your browser for you. And that also means you have to be a little careful with clearing your browser settings. Make sure you don't, if you like to go clear browser data, you could lose your sketches. So it's good to try and add this website to a list to not clear the data from it if you end up using this quite a bit. Next things, there's something called sync data. I don't think I'll get into today in the session, but basically what this does, the code that we're doing here is shared by everyone. So you have the exact same code running on your computer as I do. And what sync data is for is it lets me send local data into the session. So this was especially intended for during the pandemic lockdowns, that we could send MIDI data, like musical instrument data, or our mouses, or EEG sensor data, kind of anything from our computer into the session, and both people could play with visualizing it. But yeah, it's longer and deeper than we have time for in this session. Yep, quick question came in. Can we download our sketch so we can share it? Definitely. Anytime you have a sketch that's happening that you're looking at, or even our COCODING sketch, there's an export button in the upper right, which lets you export the code with a picture. It grabs both. It saves it as a file so that you can drag and drop it back into the environment. You can share it as a link, which grabs the code and makes it a URL to share with someone, or you can export it as a one-page HTML file. And what that does is it sort of takes what we were doing and prepares it as a web page start that you could keep building upon. Yeah, I'm kind of breezing past the general P5 stuff. I should probably come back to those and just walk you through a bit of that, but especially this walkthrough video series will help you there. Yeah, so shared data was really intended during lockdown to collaborate with each other. I've barely played with it. I made it. I was super excited for it. I haven't had tons of need to use it, but it's there for purposes. I locked down the room, which basically limited who could edit, just so that we wouldn't introduce a ton of bugs and everyone typing all at once, chaos style. That's why, like usually with a classroom with a lot of people, I would lock it and then people actively ask to edit. So I see a bunch of people here who have asked to edit. So I'm going to let 2 spontaneous people, EE Music, and I'll let Big Hearted Stinkbug edit. So I just toggled their names. And if I put my mouse over the user list, I could see where their cursors are. So there I can see Big Hearted Stinkbug is there. I can see EE Music typing in some stuff. We want to add one more L to the ellipse. Whoops. There we go. All right, we have, I think, a Zoom annotation taking place. Disable annotations for others. Sorry, I'm gonna turn that off because I'm seeing it on here. I'm not quite sure how to clear an annotation. Okay, yeah, so now that's interesting. The mouse is now 3 times lower than where I'm expecting to draw it, which is quite an interesting feeling while going there. I'm going to disable that one. I'm going to enable 2 other people who have their names up. Hello. Yeah, and basically you can sort of take turns enabling people, disabling people, and that way you can ask like who has the answer to a certain question while walking through something, and then letting them go and type it in themselves to make the answer. When it's a small group, when I've been coding with students and it was okay that everyone could code, I would leave that disabled. Hey, that's nice. We have a rectangle that's tracking our mouse from the upper corner down as big and far as our mouse is. That's really nice. Maybe it's also nice to add like a fill 25550, so it's semi-translucent. And there's something called broadcast mouse and X. This is just kind of a funny feature that if the room is locked, I can press this and now you should be seeing my mouse on your screen. Like it should be controlling the shapes on your screen. And this is sometimes useful for demonstrative purposes, just so you could show someone else exactly what you're seeing. but I'm not using it so much other than usually writing out some scribbles. Are there questions about this environment, what we've been doing so far? Any questions out there?
So it looks like this is implemented with CRDTs. Have you considered like using those data structures to, I know you've moved this to mouse and potentially sensor data. What about actually collaborating on the visual output and having everybody in the room be able to combine their individual visual elements into a combined sketch?
Yeah, that's a super interesting idea. I haven't done that directly, but I'm super inspired by tools like Hydra, the web browser video synthesizer, where with that tool, they're playing with WebRTC and able to pass textures between people. And so, yeah, it would be interesting if how that could work. I haven't gotten into that at all. At the very beginning of COCODING, there used to be a button called layers, and that pre-filled the session with like separate functions that drew to graphics, create graphics. And that way each person had their own layer, and then you could choose combining them. And the trickiest thing was, what's the order of the layers? Who gets to be on top? Who's on bottom? And then the downside was when you press that button, you had 50 lines of code, which was maybe kind of daunting at the beginning, especially for beginners. But I never brought it back as a possibility of like, here's a quick paste if you want to play in that direction. Yeah, but I think with layers is probably a start, but then it's not, I mean, we're all seeing the same thing. No, so of course it would be interesting to maybe have a different way where you're not necessarily seeing the same code, but seeing the same output from each other's code. Yeah, maybe that would be not, I wonder what it'd be called. It maybe not co-coding, but co-canvassing or something like this. Yeah, that's a great idea. I'm going to take a quick step. Yep, go for it.
I just wanted to say that I think coming from the Hydra workflow, you know, another great way of doing that would be using different canvases in P5, and everyone has their canvas and they combine it using load pixels and that sort of stuff. That would be great.
Definitely. Yeah, it would be interesting. I think I haven't played with WebRTC enough yet, because I think that's something that protocol is needed to be able to send the textures around. And I already have WebSocket set up. That's how we're able to synchronize this text. And so I think it's nearly there just to make that handshake for a WebRTC connection. Yeah, definitely something to explore.
The one thing I've seen as an educator with that that's tricky is that WebRTC is blocked in a lot of school networks. And so if you're trying to do this with students, it kind of gets it gets hairy with that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and I think for a long time I was curious, is WebRTC versus WebSockets, which is better? One is peer-to-peer, which is great. One is going through a server. And then I've slowly experienced that it's more stable for more people in WebSockets. But lots to explore and look into. So I'm going to unlock the room just so we can have a little bit of hopefully good chaos, and anyone can edit. If you see a bug, maybe try to fix the bug. Let's keep the code fairly simple, just so we don't get into deep, complex things that are able to break. But anyone can edit right now. And I do this all the time in a classroom, that maybe I'm demonstrating something and we get it to a certain point, and then I unlock the door and say, hey, let's all edit and see how long we can keep it running, is also a thing, like without bugs. And again, you can put your mouse over the user list, and then you see where everyone's cursors are. So I have them hidden by default for efficiency, and then you can find out where everyone is. Yeah, and just some quick notes about P5Live. It's a tool, it's online, it's free to use. You can look in the README for downloading it offline. I'm primarily only using it offline myself. so I don't need an internet connection. It has all kinds of settings to customize, especially customizing shortcuts. If you are on a Windows or Linux, you'll want to override a few shortcuts that I did that might have broken some things. The references are built into this because the idea is that maybe you're VJing and you need to quickly look up how does what is something like pixel density work? And then I can go read about that and quickly find out, okay, that's what I have to do, and then close it. And nobody noticed in the club that you were doing that. Or it's just great while you're learning to quickly look up the functions that you're playing with. There's also the ability to do autocomplete. So let's see, we have a rotate. Oh no, we're in WebGL. That's fine. I can tell we have an error, says somewhere around line. Yeah, maybe this while loop might be causing a bit of issue. We lost our closing bracket. I'm going to turn off that for a minute. There is autocomplete you can look into later. I just show it real quick. If I'm doing rotate and I'm not quite sure what they are, I can press Command space and then, or Option space rather, and then it brings up the P5 things. And so this can be useful for students learning to activate. There's a chalkboard, which I use for teaching, that I can open this up and I can sort of draw something and say, hello. And I can explain stuff to the class of like how a sine wave works. There's multiple drawings. So I could explain something and say, this is like -1 and this is +1, and use it while I'm teaching. That I kind of open these up and you can hide the background so you can still see the code or what's happening, or you could change the opacity of it. So sometimes I use it just to highlight code. I'll say like that with enough opacity is where you should be looking. That's where the magic is happening maybe. There is this visuals only pop-up. This is just sort of something, if you wanted to show these visuals without the code, it opens up a pop-up that's streaming our canvas. And that's probably where the starting point is for sharing these textures around on the internet, because this is grabbing what the canvas has seen. And I would start there. And I talked about exporting earlier. Let's see. Oh, we have this RDX. I think someone might be testing something out. I'm going to make that a comment as they type and test their keyboard. Yeah, maybe before we switch over to another, let's see, is there anything else I really want to tell you about here? Yeah, it's essentially chat. And again, so this works really well for a whole classroom. I've had over 30 people inside of it without a problem. And when teaching, I'm often creating URLs ahead of time for the students. I can just invent, it has to be 5 characters long, but I can invent those letters and then share those as links on a syllabus and tell the students, hey, go into that space. And when you have an issue, we can meet there. There are problems that if we do tons of undos and pastes, we eventually kind of kill the room because it's having to keep track of all those changes. And the implementation I'm using in this COCODING, I've learned isn't the best. And so the next tool I'll show you is using a much more advanced way of synchronizing text where it's pretty bulletproof. Yeah, but it's super fun to watch where people are typing, what they're doing. I see all kinds of animals running all over our code, trying things out. I'll give a last chance. Are there any other questions out there about this environment? Yeah, I recommend, again, I recommend hanging out with just one other person, 2 other people in a COCODING session where it's a bit calmer and you take turns just kind of like riffing with each other. Yeah, how do you use other libraries? How about using other P5Lib like Sound and others? Yeah, exactly. So in P5Live, the P5.js and P5 Sound are always loaded by default. If you ever don't want to use P5 Sound, you just say no P5 Sound, and now P5 Sound is disabled. And the reason this is there is in case you're loading like tone.js or some other sound library. If you want to load other libraries, you just say let libs equal, and then it's an array. So you have a collection of paths to each library, path to each lib you're adding. And in the online version, then you should link what's called the CDN path, this content delivery network path, which you can find on all sorts of most GitHub pages show you how to link to the libraries. And you can have as many libraries loaded at the top of the sketch, and then each of those get added at compile time. When you're running the offline version, then you can simply give a local path to the P5Live folder where these things are waiting. And for assets, we also need to do things like find a place online to host them. I often use glitch.com or Imgur to host those things and bring them in spontaneously. Yeah, super fun to see what happens. This is kind of code poetry with a whole bunch of keyboards coming in at different places, different areas. Interesting, good to know. P5 globals aren't available before. Yep, that's very true. Great. Comments people are leaving in there. Yeah, it's really nice to leave comments in there, leaving comments in the chat. And I'm going to wrap up this view of P5 Live. So I encourage, it's again, just p5live.org. The link to the videos I wanted to talk about, if I go to YouTube, I'll give you a link to this walkthrough. Let's say play all. Sorry, let's go back. How do I get to this? I want to just say, here, I copy this link. I'll add this into the chat. Walk through videos for P5 Live. Yep, and I would just add a bookmark to this later on for viewing, and I walk you through a lot of the functionality on here. Not yet co-coding, so you just had your introduction to how that works. Okay, I'm going to show you another tool, and this is a sneak peek of the next iteration of development. And so what I realized with P5 Live is we're all inside of the same room, which can be tricky with Zoom and WebEx and these other tools. We got so used to breakout sessions, breakout rooms, where we could go have conversations with just a couple people. And I realized teaching code remotely, it was really difficult to have students look at the code and follow along and work on their code if they didn't have a second monitor. And so I'd tell all my students, please go to the thrift store for $10, $20. You can get a second monitor, but maybe there's issues with space, computer, etc. So I really wanted to have a system where we could see the code side by side, and my code could be on the left, their code could be on the right, and we could have different sessions. Each person could have their own session because especially asking for help, it was super hard to have students ask for help and have me have to stop my screen share. And I really wanted students to help each other. And so in a physical environment, it's easy just to tap someone on the shoulder or raise your hand and I can quickly run around and have a look and see what's going on. But in a digital environment, that's so hard to do. And so this next, it's a project I've been working on since last spring as a grant from our university called COCODING Classroom. And I will give you the URL. What I'm going to quickly do is, since we have so many people, I'm going to quickly build a bunch of sessions and hope this works. I'm going to build 30 sessions, which is where it maxes out at 29 actually. And I'm going to add this to the chat. Let's go to COCODING Classroom. This is the link, and you need to know the login and password for this site. So let me give that to you in just a second. Again, I would use a Chromium browser. I'm going to close P5 Live from the background, just so it has an echo mode by default. So if you're not looking at it actively, it should pause P5. There, I see one person has arrived. Great. Yeah, so again, it's this link I just gave you in the chat. And this is the login and password you have to enter when you first try to load the page. I'll copy this and add this here. This will just be a temporary access because it's in progress. Next week, I have at our university a beta test with students and some staff testing it out. And I hope to release this beginning of spring, which is coming very soon. So I hope as soon as possible to share this publicly. And what you'll find out, you land in this space and you got a chance to rename yourself. And you'll see we have this split screen paradigm. And so my code is on the left rather, and I'm going to give us a circle, mouse X, mouse Y, 50. And you should all be able to draw on the left side. And one is editing already on the right side. And what I recommend is go find a room of your own. This sandbox space is kind of a collective space. And I would leave this room empty. To change rooms on the right side, you just grab that pull down menu and go select a room. So get into a room. I'm going to go randomly into a room. I'm the only one there. And you can rename it just so we know it's taken. So you just click the pencil next to the name. And I'm going to call this Ted's room. And now when you look at the list, oh, it's people are editing. That's why this thing keeps disappearing. I have this room and I have this space where I can edit as a student next to the shared code. So you can have pairs, you can be multiple people in there, but for now, I would recommend just one person at a time, go into a separate room, or you can be two people in a room is also fine. And basically, I can be demonstrating stuff on the left and you can be doing that as well on the right. So I'm going to add a fill that's random 255 and let this thing be grayscale colorful. Or add more random values. If I had 3 of them, 3 random values, then I can have all sorts of color happening. And hopefully you're seeing my code on the left and your code on the right. And you can make edits there. And if anyone is having trouble, you have next to your name. So you're always the very top person on the list. You can click on your name to do the same, changing your name and color. And you have this option with a hand. And if you click that hand, it requests help. And it kind of waves to everyone that you need help there. So I see Bodhi has done it. And what we can all do is anyone can click on that hand and say, offer help. So I just jumped in and now I'm in there and I can say, hello, what's the issue? And you can offer each other help. And so it's intended that the teacher can quickly jump between the sessions. I'll go jump to someone else's room. And nope, it looks like it's working. That's great. I'm going to go jump to someone else's room, number 4. That's where I was. I'm going to go jump to number 1. Interesting. Oh, there we go. Number 4, Pedro's room. Can't edit my room. Interesting. But then maybe you figured it out and got it to work. I'm going to go to room 16. Can't type. Uh-oh. Can you type on the right side? Testing. Uh-oh. Good to know. I wonder why. You also can't edit your room. Same here. Oh, strange. Okay, yeah, that's why this is called a beta test, and we're checking out what kind of issues there might be. Couldn't type in my room on the right side, but a page reload fixed it. Okay, if you can't edit, try refreshing your page. Command R. Now you can edit. Okay, great. I'll have to figure out what's going on. Maybe the access rights aren't there until a refresh. There you go. Great. Now you can work. Awesome. Good to know. I make a note to myself. Can't edit until refresh for some people. Yep, this is constant wear, which means I'm developing it since an hour before our workshop started. And so I'm happy for as many bugs, things people ran into. Yeah, super interesting that the sandbox was editable, but not the rooms. I make a note, no prob with sandbox. Yeah, I haven't finished implementing it yet, but what I'm slowly working on is the ability that when you're the first person in a room, you can basically become the admin of the room. Because at the moment, we're kind of like in a giant apartment. There's no doors. on any of the rooms, and anyone can jump into another room and edit. And so the idea is that each person can become the owner of a room and control who has write access in that room. So you can go check each other's code out, but only make changes if the person allows it, but it's not quite finished yet. There was another comment. Moving, my cursor appears 3 characters to the left of where it is. Okay, good to know. I'm still playing with the exact cursor alignment. So, and something that I'm still developing and checking out, but one thing you'll see is I have a slightly different view than you do as the teacher, as the admin of the whole space, because I created it. So I have the ability to add more sessions. I have this feature called auto walk. And what that does, it's not going to be so great because we have so many sessions happening. But when I click this, it just sort of walks around between the rooms. Right now I have it set to just walk every 3 seconds. But normally I would set it to like 30 seconds or a minute so that I could just sort of walk between and just have a quick checkout of like what is happening, what kind of different visuals are people coming up with. And so it's on this sort of auto walk, which tries to be a bit as closest to like walking around the room and checking out how it's going with everyone. There was a question. How do I decide when a change should clear the canvas versus when a change should be integrated into the existing canvas? Yeah, you might be discussing like are you describing like the soft compile versus a hard compile? Perhaps. Yep. So at the moment I have what's called soft compile enabled. And what that means is I could change the fill to 255 and it didn't have to erase everything that had been there. Because it's soft compiling, like it noticed, hey, my change was only in the draw, and therefore I only have to update the draw, which means in the background, I can just make the next draw cycle change, and we don't have to erase anything. But if I really want to clear the canvas, then I can press Control Enter without changing anything, and that forces what I call a hard compile. So it forces a total refresh. And I've found it's been helpful with students that they can make changes and see the change just evolve. Like I can change the size of this organically, and now it's bigger without erasing everything. But when you really want to clear it, Control Enter, and that clears it for everyone. Because when we press Control Enter, we're synchronizing the change with others. And so we're saying, hey, I made a significant change. We should all get that change. Let's update our sketch. So we have to be a bit, don't get too attached to a drawing that you're making. If you're making a beautiful drawing, then you might want to hit the save button every so often, where it saves both the code we were working on and a picture. So at any time I can say export code, and I could say amazing drawing. And what that did is it just downloaded both PNG of what I had drawing, and it downloaded a JSON file, which is ready to drag and drop into P5Live. So I'm often teaching with the two tools, or I'm going to be, and it's sort of at the moment designed for exporting a file that you throw into P5Live, but this will surely evolve to letting you save maybe as a web page from what you had happening, or to also export it. I would love to export it and have it show up in the P5 editor so that you could share it and keep working with the file there too. Can you make the numbers, values, and code into spinning boxes similar to the tweak mode? I think this would be perfect for classes. Yeah, so I think you mean that you could like sort of dynamically click on something and change that number. And there is a special key that I've accidentally pressed at times in Ace Editor that does exactly that, but I do not remember what I pressed. I can randomly hold some keys. Nope. There's a special key combo. I accidentally did it. It would be something to research. I'm using what's called Ace Editor as the text editor. And it would be interesting if that feature exists there, because I've accidentally done it that I could click on a number and you kind of use the arrow keys to change things. A great feature of Ace Editor is holding down Option and you can move lines, the order of lines up and down, and a group of lines up and down. And this is really nice for just changing your mind and playing with the order of events. Yeah, but unfortunately, I don't know that feature. Is it possible to put other students' code in my left pan? Not necessarily, because the way I have it now is I'm going to go to an empty room and I'm going to say, let's pretend this student on the right fell a bit behind and they missed some of the instructions. You'll see something called compare code, and that brings up a pop-up where it tries to suggest, interesting, it's not showing it. I'll have to double check. Maybe I broke that just recently. There, now it worked. It's because of this highlight. I played with CSS. Bummer. Okay. I played with the CSS of this layer here and it's too visible. I need to make it less visible. And this is called a difference tool. And it's attempting to merge code that might be missing. So I could say, yes, I like that change, or I could selectively just do part of it. And then, yes, confirm those changes. And then I get that code on this side. So this can also be helpful for students to sort of share the link again. Sure. This can be helpful for having students selectively edit bits, or as you're demonstrating code, if they fall behind on a certain change that you made. This happens all the time, that you are demonstrating a few things and they were looking at one part of the code and then they're wondering, what change did you make? They could do this sort of compare and they could find out what exactly the changes are between the two.
Hey, Theodore, it's Steve. I asked that about the student on the left.
Yeah.
I was wondering, because you sort of mentioned, and I'm listing it too, where you see two students helping each other.
Yeah.
And just sort of that naturally happens. They look over at their screen and like find the differences. So I was wondering if there's a way to emulate that in this, where not necessarily pushing a student to the left, but me saying like, oh, I want to see Jane's on my left.
Yeah.
Jane has a hand up, so I can help Jane and see that code on the left and my code, and then I can troubleshoot with them.
Yeah. So it was a big question, and maybe it's still an unanswered question. I kind of always imagine that this code should stay the main code, and that way you always have a view on that. And at the moment, it's if somebody asks for help, then you jump into their room and are offering them help, and then you have to find a way back to your room. So if there's 30 rooms, you have to go find yourself on the list, which could be annoying. What I haven't concluded yet is maybe we need a third panel to pop up, and then you have your multitasking in 3 panes, but maybe you can quickly help them. It's a question if we have enough retail space to see 3 panes next to each other. But at the moment, what I've experienced is people jumping into another session, just seeing what's happening, kind of going room browsing, and then seeing a great thing and saying like, wow, that's awesome. How are you doing that? And in the chat, they describe which function they used. And then they both go back to that person's room and try to implement it together. And that's why we can also always jump into someone's room just based on the number here, which I now realize with 2 digits, this little box is way too small. I need to make it bigger. But I can always jump to someone's room. So I can jump to Jane's room and just go check out, awesome. We have random moving around. I'm going to go jump to PLP, moved here from the original room. And you can kind of jump. And if you know a friend or a peer who's in the list, then you can go jump quickly to their room and see what's happening. Another thing that I have is I will encourage people to, when the teacher isn't demonstrating something, I can collapse the view all the way to the left. And now that code stopped running. So I'm saving resources. That code is totally paused. And now I'm only in my code. So you can try that out. You can collapse the window, and that way you could work totally on your side and then get ready for it. I have the ability to bring everyone back to 50-50 view if I want to demonstrate something again. So I'll press this and everyone's window went back. And that way I could say, like, I could be nice and give a warning ahead of time. I could say, heads up, about to go 50-50 view. And hopefully everyone just got a little broadcast message that warns them of that. I can also do this broadcasting in here. So you should see my mouse moving on your left side. There were students who were curious about being able to see my mouse when I'm demonstrating things. And maybe one other feature that will be really useful when teaching code is the ability to track people. You may have found this. I'm going to add a lot more code. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to also add a bunch of empty space. I'm going to add a bunch of empty lines there and say long scrolling. I'm going to refresh one time. I'm going to add some more code, call it function key pressed. When we broadcast our mouse, our key presses are also being broadcast. So you can also do collaborative like typewriters and such. And I'll say function mouse pressed and add some more code, long code here. So let's pretend I have a lot of code here and the student is wondering, where is the change? Like the minute you have more than, let's say, 50 lines of code, it can be really hard for the student to know where you are. And so what you can do is you can click on someone's name. I would recommend clicking on my name. I should be at the very top with the two eyes. And if you click that, it starts to track the cursor. And that way, if I change my mouse and put it down here, it should be moving the editor on you and bringing that to the center of the view. I still have to play a little bit with the positioning. I think it's slightly off center from where it should be. But I'll say if key code equals 8, let's have a background so I have the ability to delete everything on the fly. If I hide the code, now the delete key works. Use delete to clear. Yeah, at the moment, as a student or so, you only have the ability to change the font size. There will be maybe adjusting the shortcuts as well will be necessary. As the teacher, you have the ability to turn the line numbers on and off. Maybe in a performative use case, you don't want them, but in a teaching context, I think they're really helpful. And it's not yet ready, but the ability to allow anyone to become the admin of their room so that they can limit other people from changing the code on them. And there will be some other things. Yeah, we should be leaving, unfortunately. An hour went by super fast, but I'd love to get any other feedback or questions from your side. If you've noticed something weird or something that you'd love to have there or have other ideas, please feel free to unmute yourself or add comments in the chat.
I have a friend that had an issue with P5Live. I don't know if this is already posted in the issues in the repo. But basically, he accidentally did an infinite for loop, so that logically crashes the web page. But the thing is, P5Live loads the last thing you did. So every time he enters P5Live, he can't enter P5Live, basically.
Okay. Yep. Big problem, especially when collaborating with other people, is if somebody introduces what's called an infinite loop, something where it's just happening infinitely and the browser's crashed. So there's a couple strategies to get yourself out of it. Since about a year, I have a loop breaker built into P5Live. So if anything happens more than 10,000 times in a loop or a couple seconds, it triggers it. And to override it, if you're doing data visualization, you just say, no, protect, I know what I'm doing. But by default, it's there to help you. And it should stop everything running for the person. What I recommend they do, especially if they haven't used it for a while because it's been broken, is to do #bug in the URL. And what that will do is it loads a new sketch in the background and it shows you the code you were working on as a pop-up. So you can go and fix the bug and then hit save. So I could go say, I think I fixed it and hit save. And then it reloads the code and hopefully I did. And if it's still broken, just do it again. There's a bug still, and I can go try and make another change. Another way to make sure you get out of that is just to say #new. And whoops, let me do that again. #new just forces me on a new sketch. So if I look at the menu, I'm on a new sketch and I could go back and I could always what's called inspect the other sketch and try and fix it without having to click on it. Yeah, in earlier versions, that was definitely something that happened all the time. If somebody, like if you're working on a loop, FYI, let I equal 0, I is less than 500. I'll make an infinite loop, plus equals 0. It won't compile while I'm typing my loop. If I'm on the word for or while, P5Live won't compile to make sure that I get to finish typing. So keep that in mind if you change the number. Like if I said plus equals 5, and I want to change this to a 2, I should do a hard compile, adding shift to make sure that it recompiles, because it won't recompile if I just do this. It'll say like, I don't believe we should do this yet. But I'm going to make an infinite loop. I'm going to say plus equals 0 and try to run this. And there, it told me right away, uncaught infinite loop, find the bug or add / no protect to override it. And I usually have to do that if I'm loading a big data set and wanting to do something heavier or a big 3D file or something. But I can go fix it and I can say plus equals 2, and now everything's okay. Yeah, so hopefully that can fix the problem. Super sorry that happened in the past, but now with loop protect, it should be almost impossible to crash the browser. I forgot to say, I'm going to add this, make sure this is in the recording. If you would like early access to this tool, click the About, and there's a registration link. It's just a simple link to add yourself. And so this next week, I have a 1-week intensive with local students here, where I'll get more feedback and hopefully fix as much as possible, and hope to release this in the near future for people to be able to teach with. And so first I'll release it into a really small group to get feedback on, and then I'll make it more public. So just add yourself via that. Yep, that's great to hear that it feels like being in the classroom. Awesome. Yeah, just during a 1-week workshop, being able to jump between the sessions made a huge difference of helping people and seeing what they're working on, and just being inspired that they're taking stuff and remixing it and moving it. And there's going to be a mode added to it called gallery mode. So at the end of a day, at the end of a session, you press that button, and all together you'll walk through each person's sketch in a non-destructive editing way. So you can play with the sketch, but it won't synchronize those changes. So everyone can learn from each other and remix each other, but in a local, on their computer only. And that way you can do a critique at the end of a day of building sketches up, is the intention. Looking at the comments, if there's any other things. Yeah, send feedback. Yeah, please. So sign up if you would like early access. If you have any feedback, please contact me. I'll add my email here, theodoredavis@fhnw.ch. Feel free to reach out and get in touch. If you had additional comments from what you've experienced today on either tool, I'm super happy to hear it as I try to have these help people. You can also make issues on GitHub for P5Live is out there. This tool not yet, but it will live on GitHub once it's finished. And then, yeah, that'll be a really interesting further development. What is co-canvassing? Trademark, or a better name for this? What does that mean to share our textures around with each other? Yeah, thanks for joining. Hope your teaching remotely goes smoothly in the spring and future semesters, and that you get to have as much physical teaching as possible. And I hope at the moment P5Live can help you in the immediate teaching scenario, and hopefully soon after COCODING Classroom. Thanks for joining, and see you in the other sessions.